I rolled into my hometown expecting the kind of quiet you only find on a farm. Wind brushing the wheat, cows lowing somewhere in the distance, the creak of an old barn door, maybe even the lazy hum of cicadas in the evening. What I got instead was the rattle of bulldozers, the beeping of survey trucks, and a line of neon stakes marching across my pasture like someone was setting up a giant board game on land that wasn't theirs. And right there in the middle of it all stood Carol Simmons, the neighborhood association president, arms crossed and sunglasses gleaming like she was unveiling the eighth wonder of the world. Now, Carol and I have never exactly seen eye to eye. She's the type who thinks a neighborhood bake sale is an act of leadership, and that painting fences the same shade of beige somehow builds community. But this was different. Behind her, crews were marking long white lines, stretching perfectly straight across my cornfield. At first, I thought, no way, maybe they're putting a walking trail or something harmless. But my gut told me otherwise. See, I've been around airfields long enough to recognize when a patch of earth is being measured for a runway. And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. I wanted to laugh right there, because the idea of Carol Simmons turning my father's farmland into her personal airport felt too absurd to be real. But the heavy machinery chewing up my crops told me it was as real as the dirt under my boots. I asked her what in the world she thought she was building, and she gave me that smug little smile that kind politicians practice in the mirror. Progress, Daniel. You'll thank us later. Progress. That was her word for it. Now let me pause here because I didn't come back to Oklahoma looking for a fight. I came back because I needed rest. My job in D.C. doesn't leave much room for fishing trips or Sunday naps. I figured a week at the farm would reset my soul. Instead, I was staring at asphalt trucks lining up like they were paving a Walmart parking lot. And Carol, she strutted around in her hard hat, barking orders, telling me if I didn't like it, maybe I should sell the land and move on. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war. The town already knew about it, too. At the general store, Old Man Collins leaned across the counter and said, "You heard? She's calling it a fly-in community. Folks will be landing their little planes right next to their garages." I just blinked. She wasn't building a playground. She wasn't fixing a road. She was trying to turn my father's cornfield into her private runway. And here's the part that still makes me grin when I think about it. Carol had no idea who she was messing with. To her, I was just Daniel Reed, the farmer's son who came back every now and then with mud on his boots. But what she didn't know, what nobody in town knew, was that I also happened to be the guy who signed off on every runway in this country, the director of the Federal Aviation Administration. That's right, the man she needed approval from was standing in her pasture, drinking coffee, watching her pour asphalt, and biting his tongue to keep from laughing. So I played it cool. I let her strut. I let her crew pour concrete and raise banners. I even let her neighbors fantasize about sipping cocktails while their private jets rolled into town. Because every day she built, she was digging herself deeper. And I was documenting everything. Photos of the construction, videos of the bulldozers, witness statement from neighbors who couldn't sleep at night. By the time I was done, my case file looked less like a complaint and more like a federal indictment. But Carol wasn't slowing down. She printed glossy brochures promising hangar space, convinced investors to throw money at her dream, even hammered a sign into my property that read, "Future Runway, Private Access." That one I ripped out and tossed in the truck bed, but I knew right then that she'd gone too far back down. And then came the grand opening. She made it a full-blown spectacle. Rows of folding chairs, champagne flutes sweating in the sun, a red ribbon strung across the half-finished strip of asphalt. Neighbors gathered in their Sunday best. Investors in suits fanned themselves with brochures, and a small plane circled overhead waiting to make its big descent. Carol strutted onto the stage in a white blazer, sunglasses flashing, and declared, "Today, we make history. Our neighborhood joins the ranks of the elite." I almost choked on my laughter. Elite? She'd bulldozed a cornfield, and now she thought she was opening LaGuardia. But I let her talk, let her soak up the applause, let her raise her glass of champagne to progress. And then, just as the plane lined up with the strip, I stepped forward. "Carol," I called out, steady as I could manage, "you might want to hold off on that toast. She frowned. Daniel, not now. Oh, now's perfect. I pulled my badge from my pocket and held it high for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in, and the sun glinted off the FAA emblem like a stage light. My name is Daniel Reed, I said, loud enough for the pilot overhead to hear. I am the director of the Federal Aviation Administration, and as of this moment, this runway is shut down. Silence fell so heavy you could hear the crickets. Then chaos broke loose. Investors flipped through their contracts like the fine print might save them. Neighbors whispered, I knew it. And Carol, her face went white as chalk. You can't do this, she stammered. I smiled. Come as a preacher on Sunday. Carol, I'm literally the only person who can. Right on cue, the deputies I'd called in waved their signals, and the pilot banked hard, aborting the landing. The roar of that engine climbing back into the sky was sweeter than any music I've ever heard. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some booing, but everyone knew the show was over. Carol tried to spin it, called it a misunderstanding, but the cameras caught every stammer, every excuse, every crack in her armor. And when the sheriff asked her to come down to the station for questioning, the neighbors clapped like they'd been waiting years to see it. In the days that followed, the so-called runway was torn up, the investors backed out, and Carol was voted out as president of the association. My farm slowly healed, though the scar of black asphalt and the dirt lingered for a while like a ghost. And me, I finally got the peace I came home for. Not the way I expected, but peace all the same. I still sit on that porch some evenings, coffee in hand, thinking about the whole ordeal. My father used to tell me, son, pride always crashes harder than any storm. He was right. Carol thought she could outvote, outspend, and outbulldoze the rules of the sky. But in the end, the only thing that really took off was her ego, and it crash-landed faster than she could say progress. And maybe that's the real story here. It's not about bulldozers or runways. It's about what happens when power goes unchecked, when someone believes the rules don't apply to them. Because sooner or later, reality comes roaring in like a jet on final approach, and there's no outrunning it. So let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have kept quiet and let her dream burn itself out? Or would you have stepped in the way I did? Was I protecting my community? Or did I go too far flexing the weight of my position? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I want to hear how you see it. And if you've ever had your own battle with a neighborhood bully, I got a feeling you'll have a story or two worth sharing. And hey, if this tale made you think or even made you laugh, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, this wasn't the first HOA showdown, and it won't be the last.